Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karo Ahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvi Shavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. May Brahman protect us, may Brahman sustain us, may Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the studies, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om Peace, Peace, Peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Good morning from the SRV Association's ashram here in Hawaii on the Big Island, where we always maintaining a sacred atmosphere at the ashram, holding a presence that is based in Samkhya Yoga, the body with its enumeration of the 24 cosmic principles that we live amidst, inner and outer ones, and always mindful of the energy that courses through us and all its different levels. That's yoga. And always mindful of the deification of all principles. That's tantra. And always mindful of the great mind itself. Mindful of the mind, a great mind, which is Vedanta with its 3 levels of philosophy: dualistic, qualified non-dualistic, and non-dualistic Advaita. So Samkhya then is our body, yoga is our energy, tantra is our heart, and Vedanta is our great mind. And we try and synthesize those together by using the 4 yogas. Those 4 get synthesized in practice by the 4 yogas. The yoga of Jnanam, wisdom, which we are about to engage in here at Satsanga this morning, and Bhakti, devotion, which is underlying everything. Otherwise we wouldn't have come to the path, and we wouldn't be doing this sacrifice for the last 20 years that SRV has been maintaining an atmosphere in human consciousness here on earth with its several ashrams. And also the yoga of action, karma, which we engage in every day, hopefully based on that knowledge and devotion. Again, a synthesis of yogas. And finally, the yoga of meditation, which we just finished. All of us together here at the ashram this morning for about an hour, from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., and it's now about 7:15, and we are proceeding on towards the additional atmosphere of self-inquiry, that is Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara, the way in which a Vedantist, a Buddhist, or any spiritual aspirant inquires into the nature of reality, which also must include knowing the nature of relativity. Western science is big on the word relativity, but Vedanta science is big on the word reality, and it wants to give that at least equal footing to begin, and then if you give it equal footing, then reality will begin to outstrip relativity. It won't be able to keep up, and that's called enlightenment, or the death of ignorance, or samadhi, or nirvana, or yoga, various words in which you can apply to that, which have been instanced and exemplified by all the great seers of the world, and in many different religious traditions, as we will be speaking about later today at our class at 2:30, which goes deeper into the Jnana Yoga. But this period here is more about asking questions, so we may have some questions online from all of you this morning if they come in, or in case you're busy with other things and you have to look back on this live streaming later. My students around the United States and in India and places, then we have a small group here that can ask questions as well, so that this hour can be spent in Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara has been there since early rishis. There's Yoga Vishishta. In the scripture Yoga Vishishta, you read about it a lot. The you find out that in the great hall of King Dasaratha, when the young avatar Ram, a little younger than you, my nephew is seated here with me today, and he was there with Lord Vashishta, one of the great rishis, and other rishis of King Dasaratha's court, and they would meet every day before sundown. Everyone, the common people, the rishis, the priests, the royalty, everyone would get into one big hall, and they would start talking about God. And when the conversation got going, there were also foreign dignitaries there, because King Dasaratha had a huge palace and lands, whole Koshala lands around that he presided over. He was himself a manifestation of knowledge, higher knowledge. So they would speak, and they'd start speaking about spiritual subjects, and then so much time would pass, and before they knew it, the sun was rising. They had started speaking before the sun had started setting, and then they all of a sudden came back to their normal state of consciousness, as it were. Says, "Oh my gosh, I have to go to work now. The sun is up." So this is described in the ancient scriptures, how they would enter into that spirit of self-inquiry, and then they would just get entirely absorbed in it. And people would leave in a very illumined state. Their worries gone, their brooding a matter of the past, and they would live their day until the next evening session in the spirit of light. So it described a very beautiful time. So Atma-vichara has been there since that ancient time, millennia before Christ, and all the way up to this time in that very hoary and auspicious figure we know as Ramana Maharshi. He's one of the more contemporary Indian seers, probably the most contemporary of all Indian seers that have gained great notoriety. He who was a great Advaitist and who counseled people. He was also very big on Atma-vichara and brought back in current times this question, who am I? Which is kind of the epitome of Atma-vichara. Who am I? So you ask that question, am I the body? Am I the energy? Am I the mind? Am I the intellect? Am I the ego? Am I any of these five sheaths, or is Vedanta correct when it says you're not the five sheaths, you're actually that essence dwelling inside of them that has taken them on as a covering, that has assumed them. And you can just as easily slough them off, because you do so tonight in deep sleep, so why shouldn't you do so in meditation? And be ready for it when you're going to slough them off for good at the time of passing from the body, from all coverings. So in Vedanta, it's a matter of coverings, taking on coverings. That's how they describe it. Other philosophies describe it in other ways, but basically that ability to detach and maybe even to renounce, at least externally, if not externally and internally, in the case of a monastic person, is very big in all walks of life, from Christianity, the original teachings of Christ, back 500 years previous that with Lord Buddha, and on forward to the time of Ramana Maharshi and our own ideals here, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and Swami Vivekananda, who came here in 1893 to bring us this Vedanta. So with that as a sort of opening to get our morning mind awake, we will take some questions. I know Adam has a question to start out.
Yes.
You'll speak as loud as possible for the live streaming audience, but then I'll rephrase it so that we'll be able to hear it.
How do you transcend the three gunas? And is this process a natural process or something that should be attained separately?
All right, thank you for that question. It is that very unique subject to Vedanta, the three gunas. It's peculiar to Vedanta. You don't hear this teaching anywhere else. We have to outline the three gunas first. To make it as simple as possible for us, there are modes of nature, and nature in our way of explaining in Eastern philosophy, in Sankhya, in Tantra, in Vedanta, in Yoga, and so forth, as I was just saying, happens to have a manifested side to it, and it has an unmanifested side to it. In most Western way of thinking, it's all external. There's only an external, that's all there is, just the world exists, just my body exists, that's it, zip. From medicine to psychology to anything Western, it's all matter. It's all the physical universe. One world alone. And that being a very limited world at that. So when you say nature, prakriti, which is what the koki frogs are saying all night, if you listen hard enough, you'll hear them saying prakriti, prakriti, prakrit, prakrit, prakrit. They're saying nature, nature, nature. I'm in nature, you see. So the unmanifested side of nature, if you were to explore that, those things which are in potential, we call it, or held in abeyance, is another Vedantic phrase, are things that are the kingdoms within you, is one way of saying it. Also, those things which you bring out of unmanifested nature and manifest. The mind is involved in this. It's always manifesting forms and then giving up forms. Like in deep sleep, it manifested the waking state, then it went into the dream state, and when it went into the dream state, all these materials became subtle, and now I'm playing with them in my dream. And then it went into deep sleep, and it said, I think I'll destroy the sandcastle, you see, that I built on the beach, like a little kid, you see, and watch the waves just take it down, and I'll go formless for a while. Even 20 minutes of formlessness will make me feel very good, by the way, in case you haven't noticed. Or the afternoon nap kind of psychology. So all of that is coming out of unmanifested prakriti, and then it's going back into unmanifested prakriti, just like waves are coming off the ocean and sinking back in the ocean, which is the message of the ocean to you, really, if you're an avatut, observing it. So out of that unmanifested prakriti, if you were to explore that, which you do in meditation, in deep sleep you don't really do much exploring, you just sort of give into it. See? And go unconscious. But seers say, try and go into those states using your consciousness. And that would, Atma Vichara is actually going into this wisdom using our consciousness right now. So we practice the moment, don't we? We practice the presence in the moment when we focus our mind on anything. Somebody asked me the other day, how do I get over distraction? And I said, by concentrating. You always use the opposite. It's not a matter, you don't ask the question, why am I distracted? You give the answer to the mind, concentrate. And then you become one-pointed. Your mind becomes single. So if you were to explore unmanifested prakriti, you'd find the gunas at the basis of most everything, the modes of nature. So it's not just the modes of gross nature with the 5 elements, but it's the modes of subtle nature and subtler nature, even causal nature. Causal is a good word. You're really speaking karma when you talk about a word causal, because you're getting to the original cause. In the beginning was the word, for instance, was Christ's way of getting us to the original cause, so that we could see that everything came out of the word. And science, 2,000 years later, is saying, oh, look at everything's vibrating. It's the same thing. The word is the original vibration, that's all. And that vibration never goes away, not even in deep sleep. You can hear it humming if you take your mind into deep sleep, consciously. And in meditation you can hear it humming. So you know there's something primal back there. Ramakrishna used to say, it's like going to the beach and get out of your vehicle, start walking over sand dunes, you hear this distant sound. See, you go over sand dune after sand dune, see, the sound gets louder, still can't see the ocean. Finally you break over the last sand dune and there it is, people on the beach, sailboats, kids building sound castles in the sand and watching the waves destroy them, you see. There it is, Om. So that's an inner journey you're taking. And as you're taking it, you're moving through the kingdoms of heaven within you and seeing the different levels from gross to subtle to causal. The 3 worlds, they call them, if you really want to generalize them into not just a plethora of kingdoms, like there are millions of planets in this kingdom alone, but in your inner kingdom there's also millions of stations where consciousness occupies. And so the seers, like Christ, the king, my Father's mansion has many chambers, you would go inside and inspect them. So as he inspected them from gross to subtle to causal, you would come upon these 3 gunas. And you would see that, if you want to put it again in simple terms, which I promised to do a long time ago, 10 minutes ago, they're pretty much just inertia, activity, and balance. I mean, that's a scientific way of putting it. So if you apply those to the creation, preservation, and destruction template, you see, then pretty much you can say that's kind of a scientific way that Vedanta points to the presence of something that's inert, something that's always active, and something that reaches a balance. Now, if you apply those same gunas to the mind, which you should, because all matter has come out of the mind, then you have the tendency of people to be lazy, despondent, depressed, sleepy, ignorant, heavy, weighty, see, brooding, depressed. I said that. So basically all of these slothful tendencies, and that takes over the mind. I said the teaching of the three gunas was peculiar to Vedanta because they want to get you up and out of emotionalism, and they want to get you up and out of praise and blame. As you say, oh, I'm sleepy today, I'm slothful and everything, it's my fault, you see. So you feel bad about yourself. But no, it's a mode of nature that came upon you. Every mind suffers. Otherwise there wouldn't be a dark night of the soul for Christ. See, every mind suffers it on some level. Some people take it on a huge level. Dark night of the soul is a huge level of tamas. You have to pierce through it. If you can pierce through that darkness, you can pierce through darkness anywhere, see. So you get over your own ignorance by rising above tamas. That's the first guna, tamas. Then you find, how do I get over tamas? By rajas, restlessness. I have to get restless. I have to get active. Now, it's a matter of whether my energy is going to be frenetic, it's a good word in English, frenetic, you know, or whether it's going to be tempered with sattva, which is the third guna, balance. So you're always looking for this balance. Everyone's looking for sattva in life. Sattva is happiness. Sattva is contentment. Sattva is the doorway to peace. I would give peace a higher station than sattva, because you want to transcend sattva too eventually. That's the interesting teaching about the three gunas, is they just say, okay, get out of slothfulness into restlessness, and now get balanced, you're fine now. Game over. No, Rajas and Tamas are trying to get back in and encroach on the kingdom of sattva all the time, aren't they? You can't keep the mind balanced. If you could, you'd be a yogi or a yogini. And that's going to require then that you transcend even the idea of balance, which means happiness isn't going to cut it. Contentment's a good start. Peace, you need peace of mind first and foremost. She said that to us. Holy Mother, my teacher's teacher. Sri Sharada Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's wife and spiritual consort. You need peace of mind first and foremost. So she'd like you to start out with sattva and then use that as a nice little springboard to vault yourself into transcendence. That is, in other words, in samadhi, coming down to sattva. Oh, I'm in danger now. Here comes tamas and rajas, you see. I came to Mr. Thomas's neighborhood. Came to Mr. Rajas' neighborhood. Thomas, Mr. Thomas, and Mr. Rajas. You see, that's how we joke about it. In the phone book, there's lots of Thomases and there's lots of Rajas. See, but you want Mr. Sattva's neighborhood. So you want to get out of those. So you use sattva always as a springboard back to transcendence, and that's how they say transcend the three gunas. Answer to your question. So first you specify what's happening to the mind. It's right now lazy, slothful, I can't raise it. How am I going to do this? I have to get up out of bed and I've got to start the process. I have to start walking, I have to start running, I have to start breathing. Breathing would be a good thing to start with, as Buddhism and Vedanta ask you to do. And then I can get some rajas. Now I feel better, I'm not so slothful anymore. My mind is active, but now I can't meditate very well because my mind is too active. So I have to bring sattva into the picture. So you use one to get over the other. It's similarly put in Patanjali's yoga, the 8-limbed yoga, the authentic yoga, is where he said, you get over the klista vrittis, the negative thoughts by the aklista vrittis. You use one to get over the other. And then with the aklista vrittis, when you've got positive thoughts, then you have a possibility now of stopping thought, because let's put it real clearly to everyone right now, meditation is the stoppage of thought. I mean, he said in his Yoga Sutras, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the most famous of all his sutras, number 2. And there are hundreds that you're going to look at in the Yoga Sutras, but that one, he starts off the game saying, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Chitta Vrittis are vibrations of the mind. Here's your thoughts, basically. Yoga is union, and Nirodha means to destroy. So you're going to want to destroy or quell or even out or dissolve, whatever word you like to use that doesn't shock you too much, your thought process. Because why? Because back there when you explored unmanifested Prakriti and you saw the 3 gunas and you went to the Father's chamber, the chamber of the Father's mansion, you saw that everything was vibrating and the Almighty Father was beyond vibration. I and my Father are one means I reached a place where even Om was transcended. What to speak of the 3 gunas? I dissolved into Om, and Om was a porthole called the third eye that I got to the Father through the Son via, you see. So you realize now there's a state of formlessness there. Buddha called it nirvana, and the Father of Yoga called it asampragata, seedless samadhi. The Father of Vedanta Vedavyas called it nirvikalpa samadhi. Zen Buddhist, since we have a Zen sitter here today, called it satori. So they know about this state of formlessness, which is your essence, and which you go into deep sleep unknowingly and come out of. You dissolve the worlds in space and time as you move through the 3 states of consciousness, and you project them again. This is the way they think about it. They don't think about it in terms of a linear time that had a beginning, and now we're in the middle of it somewhere, and then it's going to end sometime. That's the physical cause you're talking about. But you haven't looked at the subtle cause, and you haven't looked at the causal cause, therefore you don't know the meaning of the word that you use, even for physical universe, when you call it eternal. That there is a word called eternal means God exists. That's it. It is eternal. That's its nature. So beginnings and middles and ends, don't think in those terms. When Buddha manifested himself 550 years before Christ, and some millennia after Ram and Krishna and the other avatars of India, and one of the more current avatars or manifestations, he set himself down in the river of time, and he saw that river of time always flowing eternally. But he picked a date and he assigned himself there. See, it wasn't like he was anything new. He said, there have been many thousands of Buddhas before me, and there'll be thousands of Buddhas after me. As long as the river of time's flowing in people's minds, because that's where it flows, then I'll come down and help save them from the river of time. So one of his greatest teachings is everything passes, right? So he got that on the shores of a river. He sat long enough and he saw the same thing come around again. But if he's in the river, he's going around with the thing, he never knows it comes around. You never know, because the gunas, you'll never find the gunas because you're going around with them. See, they're somewhere behind you and you're ahead of them, or it's ahead of you and you're somewhere behind them and you never find them. You have to stop. Cease and be still, he said last week at class. So that's stopping meditation, cutting time down, and going inside and exploring the kingdoms of heaven, and coming out and asking a question like you just asked. Yes?
Can I ask a follow-up question?
A follow-up question.
And I hope I didn't miss something in your response, but achieving the level of sattva and having control over remaining in a sattvic state, that's a huge accomplishment. But can you even be in this world and be transcendent of all 3 gunas?
Yes, because you're really never in the world. The question is, in case it wasn't heard properly, is can you really, in a sattvic state, or when you're in a sattvic state, can you really transcend it? Because you're in the world, you're in the body, and the 3 gunas are always in operation. Transcendence of the 3 gunas, according to the Father of Yoga, is at the highest, penultimately highest state. I mean, it's one of the last things that happens in a soul's attainment of enlightenment. The 3 gunas are so basic to the whole creation, the idea of creation, on all levels, outer, inner, and transcendent, or the three worlds, subtle, gross, subtle, and causal, that you're not going to encounter them and put them in abeyance until the very end of the journey. It's called Kaivalya, when you separate yourself from nature finally. As you've taken a huge ride in nature, the world of name and form, maybe many lifetimes, and then until you became world weary, you wanted a great rest, you wanted a great liberation, and then all of a sudden you said, okay, enough of this. I'm going to yoga chitta vritti nirodha. I'm going to stop the waves of the mind from vibrating, and I can do it. You can do it. That's what you once told me in your Hungarian accent, you see. So if I decide to do that, then I have reached the level where I'm going to transcend the three gunas. Now, can the three gunas be transcended while you're in the body? There's a nice name of a Swami who is one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, named Swami Trigunatitananda. He liked the concept so much and was so enamored of the attainment that he named himself after it. The bliss of transcending the three gunas. Triguna tita. Atita means to transcend. So his ideal in life was, I will get beyond these modes of nature once and for all. Sort of like Buddha sitting under the Bo tree. I will see through samsara once and for all. I have to know the truth in this life. Enough lifetimes in ignorance. I have to know the truth in this life. It's your first really pure desire that ever came upon you. All your other desires went from impure to mixed to partially pure, till you got the desire called love of God or devotion to God. But then when you got this desire of transcending form, mumukshutvam is the desire for liberation. It comes upon a soul very rarely. Most of our desires aren't there yet. We're still trying to fulfill them, and many times in the wrong way, trying to satiate them, which won't happen. But if you fulfill them in the Dharma, then they'll start to wind down, and you'll start to feel content and peaceful, and then sattva, you're at the level of the third guna, and you've mastered it, and you stay in an equanimous position all the time. You don't change. Like I saw my teacher, just the same all the time. Take him to a restaurant, he'll order the same thing every time, you see. But he never went to a restaurant, but he was a monk. But that's the way he is. He's just got it all figured out, and he intends to stay there all the time. He's not going to move from that position. That's his default zone. And he doesn't crave excitement. He doesn't have any desires to reach the end of all that. It happens. You see it in people, rare souls. So when you're seeing that, you're seeing a pure desire for liberation has come upon the soul, and they're not going to brook any other or allow any other insinuations on that. So then if they can do it, they have to do it before death, see. So I'd turn the question back on you. See, it's not that to ask whether or not you can transcend the three gunas while you're in the body, it's that's the only alternative. They will reach that before death, because after death it's not going to matter. Death to them is nothing. So they're going to do it in a state of birthlessness and deathlessness, ajati. And they achieve that before death. It's called living liberated, or jivan mukta. He's a jivan mukta. My teacher was a jivan mukta. He got all his liberation, and it wasn't dependent on birth, life, and death. It never is. It's eternal. Read my lips again, the word eternal. That's what they're looking for. And that's what they are. And that's how they're going to attain it, by realizing everything is eternal. Sarvosmi, everything is. It's like one of the most beautiful Mahavakyas, great sayings in Indian philosophy. Sarvosmi, everything is. You don't say nothing is not, or nothing is. Nothing doesn't exist, you say. That's the negative way of putting it. Nothing doesn't exist. There's no such thing as nothing, because the gunas and unmanifested prakriti are waiting there for me. When I get through exploring this world, whether it be tonight in sleep or in meditation or at death, I'll have to be exploring the other worlds. Sometimes I use that in prisons when I teach. All the men are there. I say, well, you're here in this room with me now, but earlier you were in your cell. That's just like the consciousness moving from one place to another, isn't it? Well, it does that not just in the physical sense, but it also does it in the mental sense. It moves from station to station until it realizes that its essence doesn't move. And then it stops. And when it stops, it becomes everything. Sarvosmi. No birth, no death for it. No passing of relatives, coming back with the ancestors. It got out of the river and it sat on the banks for all time and stopped the process. Like the old warrior, finally nobody can kill him. Just finally one day in the middle of a battle drops his sword and goes up to the top of the hill. He's got like a mild interest now of watching who wins, but he's not participating anymore. He just watches and observes. So that's called witness consciousness. That soul will come to that level of witness consciousness at some point in their evolution, so-called evolution. Because again, nothing's really evolving, just appears to be. And the witness knows that. Let's move from the gunas to another question.
Well, it's kind of related.
Or related.
Yeah, you mentioned about stopping the mind, and I just need a little bit more clarity between witnessing the mind, seeing the stream of thoughts go, but not attaching them, stepping back from the mind and just watching them, which is a form of meditation I've been introduced to many times.
Yes.
Versus stopping the mind altogether. I'm unclear about how that happens, or if that's the goal, because the mind just functions. If you're even in meditation, you have thoughts, but you're stepping back and not attached to them.
Yes.
So is that what you mean by stopping the mind, or do you mean something different?
I mean something different. It's you've actually pointed or indicated the difference between savikalpa samadhi and nirvikalpa samadhi. Witness consciousness, if you, even by just admitting the term or saying the term, means that there's a sense of separation there. The witness is still not merged, because he or she is a separate witness looking at phenomena. That's a very high station to achieve. Like you say, watching your thoughts. If you can do that in meditation, you've reached a certain level of mastery in yoga. And it's called meditation. But that's the seventh limb of yoga. The eighth limb of yoga is samadhi. And that's where everything will stop. We were talking about it last night, actually, when we spoke about this late last night, before bedtime, is that it's a matter of nirvikalpa means all sense of time and imaginations. Kalpanika means, in Sanskrit, means projected imaginations in time. And so nirvikalpa would be to destroy those, to make them extinct, like nirvana. So at the time when the witness sees itself witnessing, which is probably the closest way you could put it in English, then it suddenly turns and sees that its true nature is all-pervasive and indivisible. There can be no separations in Brahman. So it hasn't reached the ultimate state yet, it's reached the penultimate state. Now it has to turn like a moon to a sun and go, oh, there's where my light's coming from. And it's going to have to merge in that light. That's nirvikalpa, that's the stoppage of all thoughts. Brahman doesn't think. There's no stream of thought happening anymore. You've picked yourself up and out of the mass collective mental dream, kalpanika, and you've stopped everything. And cease and be still. It's indicated by the bijam hum. You destroy it all.
So you're still breathing?
No, the breathing stops too.
Oh.
Yeah. Even in the body, it's called kumbhaka. You're usually going rechaka, puraka, kumbhaka, rechaka, and kumbhaka. At the time of death, it all turns into an out-breath. In fact, the bijam ha has been used for it. And that's the last breath you'll take, and you'll leave the body. If you can do that consciously and not fear it, and you just give up the body like that, then you have a nice transition, let's call it.
The death.
Yeah, and the transition is not there for the illumined soul because there is no more separations. They achieved that before the time of death, Jivan Mukta, or Bodhisattva. But for any other being who's going to any other realm, whether it's to their ancestors, which heaven they call it, which isn't a very high place in Vedanta, or whether they're going to the gods and goddesses they worshipped, or whether they're going to the Trinity, or whether they're going to dissolve into Om, like a yogi does, out of one of these chakras, that's a transition, and they haven't stopped the process yet. They are still going to be involved in some sort of sankalpa, thinking, projecting, chittavrittis. But the yogis' chittavrittis, or that kind of sankalpa, is a very high and sweet and sattvic projection. So it still has some sattva, right? Hasn't transcended the three gunas yet, the third guna.
Is there an action? It sounds like an action. When you say stopping the mind, it sounds like there's a doer. I stop the mind. And I think that's a little bit of my confusion.
Yes, well, English, even Sanskrit, even any word will confuse. But then there are some words that really clarify, and you just ask for clarification. So, as far as words can tell, that's describing the process. It's not that, and there I would probably say it's not that I am stopping, but you could say I am stopping if you know I am. I mean, there's the two-word Mahavakya, I am. I mean, you've even knocked that off the quotient. I am that. Because you're causing a sort of subtle distinction between I and that, as if I and that aren't the same thing. But when you just say I am, that stops it right there. And you could say, yes, I, the great self, stopped the process by seeing my true nature.
But that's dualistic.
Yeah, it's a very, very subtle level of, it's called qualified dualism. But actually they don't really assign it that. They assign it to the Advaita, the non-dualistic. It's very non-dualistic. The actual occurrence of it is, I and my Father are one, or that thou art. That's the only way they can use any kind of 2 or 3 word mantra or great saying to indicate that. So any kind of words are going to be some sort of inference involved in them, like if I see smoke on that mountain over there, I infer there's fire even though I haven't seen fire yet. I have to go there and find fire to prove it. That's pramana. So inference and pramana, that to infer a thing and to prove a thing, are a part of the philosophical process of Atma-vichara. As long as you're in the body, as this other question was just asked, then you're aware of distinctions. Subtle distinctions in their case, and grosser ones in the case of people who are living by distinction. They want distinction. They want separations. They want to compartmentalize everything, you see. But breaking down those barriers is what the seer wants to do, showing their oneness. Like Ramakrishna had a beautiful story. He said the farmer digs trenches from the river all the way to his land to irrigate it. But if he let the water in too early through those trenches, it would be a muddy mess when he was trying to work with it. So he leaves little bulks, at the beginning of each of those little ditches that he dug in all different directions. Then when he's got all the ditches dug and he's ready, he just goes with a stick, all the work's done, he just starts knocking down those bulks and water runs into his field. And he might have taken weeks to get that to that point, but at the last moment takes him a few minutes and his field is irrigated. If you were to go up to him at that moment and see the process, you'd say, you wouldn't know all the work that went. And you just see him irrigating his field with a few strokes of a stick. So that kind of oneness is there in the marvelous sense of oneness is there in these great souls. They make it look so simple and easy.
Well, yeah, that's my other question. Like, how often does it occur in the human life? I mean, Ramana Maharshi's the great example.
Yeah.
But how often does it occur? And is that what we're aspiring to if it's 1 in 10,000 years? I don't know what the numbers are, but you know what I mean.
Yes. Basically, I think what you're saying is that it's very rare. Spiritual enlightenment is very rare.
An anomaly almost. Right?
Yes, in India it's been less of one. In the West it definitely is, in fact, to such an extent that we don't even believe that there is a reality beyond the body and beyond nature and beyond matter. Our science is based in that. Our psychology is based in one. Freud and Jung based their psychologies in a one lifetime scenario. Probably didn't have Oriental people on their therapy table. They were in Europe. So, there's a compartmentalization for you, the Western way of thinking, which is why a lot of us just abandon it, or we took the best from it, rationale, logic, and all that, and we moved with that to a place of faith because we were looking for a faith-based tradition. Once we found the faith-based tradition, we found out that that was limited too, and we needed a wisdom-based tradition. That's where we found the Eastern traditions. They're more wisdom-based traditions. They're clarifying these things for us. Well, we're going to have to work with this, like you said, for maybe lifetimes. The Jnana Yoga is something that's the quickest path, but it's also the hardest. If you can grok it, as the saying says from one of our Western novels, then you can get enlightened in one lifetime. Vivekananda said, no reason why you can't get into yoga in 6 months. Now, for souls who have grounded themselves in this in previous lifetimes, if you're thinking outside the box of one lifetime, then they come into life and they show you right away how to do it, even if they're not intending to. They're just, they find a teacher, they get on the path, they remember what they realized in a past lifetime, and they awaken. And that's it. Once you awaken, there is no ignorance anymore. Once you awaken, there are no worlds. There's just one Brahman everywhere. And you're it. It's the cosmic game of tag, You're it. Last tag. And then you just express yourself. So they ask, what is the purpose for spiritual life? Is it just to get samadhi and leave entirely? Give up the play? Well, you could bring it back around and express divinity in this life. That's what Vedanta says. Yes, you reached formlessness and you saw the end to all worlds and you stopped the thought process. You did it, because you initiated it to begin with. So you stopped it too. And then when you stopped it, there was a subtle distinction between thou and that. And you worked on trying to remove that distinction. And then the hailstone fell in the ocean and there was no more thought, no more idea or concept of separation whatsoever. It was all merged.
Right.
Well, that same state of merging is what Zen is trying to get you to understand through koans, and what Vedanta is trying to get you to understand through the Jnana Yoga and so forth. That final little nut you have to crack inside of your own mind by meditating on form and formlessness, or bondage and liberation. Those are the highest dualities. When you solve those dualities, then you get into that state. And whether you come back or not, like Vivekananda was so good at exemplifying, whether you come back again or not, makes no never mind. You never leave that state once you realize it. And guess what? We never leave that state either, you and I, us ordinary Joes, you see. What to speak of the enlightened, we're also in that state all the time. Somebody wrote me the other day and said, you told me that you should really learn this stuff from an Indian Swami, but I've learned it from you, and why do I have to go to an Indian Swami? I'm hearing it from you very well. I said, that's because I'm an expression of an Indian Swami. When I went to my teacher, I imbibed him. I didn't doubt him once. Everything he said I listened to and I believed. I had no doubts. And now I'm just him walking around in another form. Patanjali says, when a yogi's alive, he usually doesn't have children, a family, but he makes mental-born children by people he associates with. So you may have your father and mother birth and your bloodline and all that, but if you run into a yogi and you come into under their auspice, is a good way of putting it, in their holy company like Ramana Maharshi, you're one of their children. If they turn and look at you or speak to you, kind of diksha we had on the chart last class, right? All these different kinds of diksha. They can touch you, they can look at you, they can think about you, you can touch them on their feet, then you become their child, their mind-born child. That's how Father of Yoga puts it. He made many mind-born children when he lived. Christ made 12, Ramakrishna made 16, Buddha made 8. You know. These are beings that have imbibed the very spirit of the teaching and have taken the essence and accepted it fully. And ignorance died for them when they did that. So they are in that, whether they're embodied or not, they are in that condition. And from a Western way of thinking, we just can't understand that. We can't understand even maybe the very basic precepts of it, what to speak of something that's beyond processes, something that's beyond evolution, something that's beyond transformation. We can't understand those things. So I wrote back to this person, why do I have to learn from an Indian Swami? Because I learned how to get over my Western way of thinking via an Indian Swami. I don't look at it in terms of birth, life, and death anymore. I don't look at it in terms of evolution and involution anymore. I think of it in terms of one stationary, indivisible, supreme being, without transformations, without movements, without thought. And that's what I aspire to. If I'm doing it in the body, then I'm doing it in front of people who are watching. The whole world could be watching now. If we had enough hits on our live stream, we'd be saying this to everyone, you see. And that's the beauty of this particular age. I mean, we should have set this up with Ramakrishna if we had had it that, or with Ramana Maharshi, you know, wow. We would have seen it in action. But, you know, it's really better to get it soul to soul, transmission to transmission. If I found my teacher and I said, that's it, I found it, you know, and I went there and I got my ignorance attenuated, my karma's attenuated, my ignorance destroyed, then I could get on with the real reason I'm here. Is not even to teach you, because you already know all this somewhere inside of you. I'm just kind of helping to remind people. But to express the Vedanta, to take it out of books, out of temples, and express it, that's coming full circle. Because then you do prove that it exists in life, in birth, life, and death. That birth, life, and death exist in it. And that you're not subject to them, but they're a part of your thinking process. You're thinking in terms of birth, life, and death. So change that. Think in terms of eternity. That's transformation of mind. If there's any transformation that's going on here, it's not the 5 elements and water and earthquakes and, you know, Noah's Ark. That's not the transformation that's going on. That's apparent. If there's any real transformation going on, it's all up here. That was one of Vivekananda's great teachings. It's not in the animal that eats only. It's in the animal that thinks. And that's where transformation is going on, if there is transformation. He wasn't saying there is transformation, because Brahman doesn't transform. He knows reality, and he knows it doesn't change. But if there is transformation going on, look at it not at the level of the body or the energy, but at the level of the mind. Because if you can transform that critter, you can transcend the 3 gunas. And you can live in bliss and peace and understanding. There's nothing that won't be answered for you if you use this marvelous Vedanta and you know, sick it on it. See?
Yeah, I see that the Western investigative mind is filled with doubts as part of the inquiry. I'm not sure I'm saying this right, but I'm getting some awareness that the Western investigative mind is filled with doubts or goes at it that way versus what you were talking about when you said I didn't doubt my teacher.
Right.
I just followed it 100%. I'm trying to translate as to how that would work in the Western mind, knowing that I grew up with a Western mind, even though I've visited Asian countries, I grew up with that. So I'm naturally going to want to say, is that really true? How do I challenge it? How do I test it? Where is that fine line between going into a purely investigative self-inquiry mind versus, I'm not sure that teacher's telling me the right thing, and maybe I should find another one, that thing.
Yeah. Well, exception and rejection, or they call it affirmation and negation, is very big in the Eastern mind too. But it's just that they're applying it in a different region. They're applying it inwardly. We're only applying it outwardly so far. And to that degree, science was very marvelous. When it started looking inside of the object to the particle, and then the particle to the finer particle, and it went that direction, quantum physics, it thought it was looking inside of the answer, but it was actually looking inside of the effect. It's actually looking further out. The further out you go. So, the different field that Christ was asking the fishermen to enter, I'll make you fishers of men if you enter this field of the kingdom of heaven within you, just shifts the focus from matter to spirit, or at least to mind. And that's where science and Western psychology still are at loggerheads, but those are two different Western peripheries. Now, Indian yoga is philosophy in the East. That's its philosophy, is yoga. I was just saying, Sankhya is our cosmology and yoga is our philosophy. But you have to have an interest to shift to that inner periphery. If you absolutely exit from the equation and it's all physics to you, then you won't be interested in that, and none of that will make sense to you. But if you find that the particles vibrating a thousandth of a second begins to look, number one, Christ would say, don't build your house on sand. Particles begin to look like sand. And it seems like you're building your house on shifting sands. Maya was the word later coined, or much earlier coined. If you put it in terms of other teachings like Buddhism, it's shunyata. Oh, I found out that because everything here is empty, that I should renounce it, which is what Christ came to the conclusion of too. It's empty. It's shunyata. It's one of the greatest teachings. So they're all following. In Vedanta it would be called neti neti, not this, not this. They're all following a way of negation. When it hits our Western mind, we kind of hands off, because it means if we find the truth, we're going to have to renounce these pleasures. We don't want to do that. We're going to have to renounce these objects. But what they don't know is that you can enjoy the object so much more when you know it's empty. And that can be used as a justification for engaging in your enjoyments.
Allure.
Yeah, allure and all that. But actually, if you're very careful with that bit of information, Advaita, if you know the non-dual essence of a thing, that behind the tree, atomic particle tree, or the appearance tree is the atomic particle tree, you've come halfway to knowing the nature of an object. And if you stop there, you end up to be a world negator. You see, I'm just going to give everything up, and it's all empty, and phooey on it. And devil take the hindmost as far as my brethren are concerned. You see, you don't have compassion for anyone. You just reach a sort of abhava state, they call it, non-moods, and you do wipe it all out. Good for you. I mean, it was a path of emptiness. It's a very good path. It works for many people. But if you had have seen that beyond the appearance tree, Maya, illusion, form, was the atomic particle tree, and behind that you went further and you found the Atman tree, or the Buddha nature tree, then you'd be at full realization. This is called Maha-yoga, not Abhava yoga. It's called full realization. Ramakrishna said, that's what I like. I like the full weight of the fruit. People weigh the flesh and sell it, and they discard the seed, the skin, the pit, the stem. He said, I can't do that. If I want to know God, I have to know the full weight of the fruit. That means I have to know God first and foremost, but then I have to also know all the worlds in space and time. That's the pit, the stem, the skin. Then I'll have the full weight of the fruit. Then I'll be a total knower of God. It's a very beautiful think it was the bell fruit analogy he used, because people were selling just the flesh in the marketplace, and he saw that. And you feed the cows with the other out back, you see. So it's all got value. But you definitely will not know the value unless you know God first. Seek thee first. Because if you get into that pit and stem and seeds, you're just going to stay in matter the rest of your life, i.e. science and its preoccupation with the physics, its death grasp on the atomic particle. As if there's some secret there. The secret has already been discovered. All of this world is empty, and you should give it up. And the minute you give it up, you'll be free. And if you're free, you can enjoy everything much more. Without tamas and rajas coming back to you all the time. See, slothfulness and restlessness. Those things are going to haunt you in your dreams. In your waking dreams and in your dreaming dreams, they're going to haunt you. They're going to spoil the picture. This illumined soul wants bliss, and he wants it uninterrupted, and he wants it unalloyed. No mixtures in it, and no interruptions to it, and that's what we're all seeking. And it's what makes us unhappy when our desires are frustrated. Come to know that those desires can't be fulfilled in an empty world. The answer is so subtle. You think well, I'll do better tomorrow. It's not a matter of doing better necessarily. That's process, isn't it? But it's a matter of realizing that good, better, and best are all in one form, right here inside of yourself, and that's stopping the process. There is no more process now for me. No more evolution, no more birth, life, death, no more desire. I'm just going to stay here, thank you. I'm happy. I'm content. I'm peaceful. I'm blissful. Why should I move? Which is why Ramana Maharshi stayed in one place. Even when he got cancer in his elbow or wherever it was, you see, people say, oh, we're so sorry, you're going to leave us, And he said, they keep telling me I'm going somewhere. I don't understand that. Where would I go? To him, the body was just an add-on and, a drop-off. And his self's just sitting there. He says, saw this movie once where two men were fighting and there was an airplane propeller right there, you see. And all the audience is thinking, oh my God. So one finally got pushed into it, diced up, see. And I was thinking, yes, but the Atman was not diced up. This is how I watch a movie. See? Nothing happened. A body just got, of flesh and bone just got rent apart. But nothing happened. The same man that was there when the body was in existence is the same man that's there after the body got diced up. And the whole audience is like, oh, reaction, you see, emotion. Well, you want to get free of that. Father Yogi says, reaction to good and bad is the real problem, not good and bad itself. Precious teaching of the Dharma.
Then you have your awakening with a near-death experience where you leave your body, your heart stops beating, and it's just a sudden, unexpected occurrence. And then can you come back as an awake person?
Usually, if you go into deep sleep a fool, you'll usually come out a fool. You won't be... That is, you can have these little epiphanies, these insights, and they are storing up inside of you. You have to take all of these insights you've had over 20, 30, 40, 50 years of practice, and at one point have this one superlative experience that is the amalgam of all of them. That's awakening, enlightenment. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, enlightenment isn't like, well, at one point he said, enlightenment is sort of like striking a match in a dark room. Poof, everything's revealed in a flash. But he was talking about final enlightenment. He wasn't talking about all the stages the soul went to and had all these premature enlightenment experiences, these leading up, these epiphanies, these insights that led up to that one final breaking of the camel's back. You see, straw that broke the camel's back is a very good saying. Finally, you just added that one little straw of this final realization that the worlds of name and form in time and space based on karma are unreal, and you drop that one and the whole thing fell apart like a pickup sticks. You see, if you ever play that when you were a kid, be very careful, see, or you're out of the game. In fact, that's kind of an interesting analogy, because there's, I think it's called, I don't know, Gokulam or something. There's some strange name they have in India for this game, where sort of like our Monopoly, that the last person to get out of the game is the winner, not the first person to reach go. It's in Ramakrishna was describing, it's the last person. If you stay in the game long enough, you're the winner. So he used to say that about himself. I'm a very poor player. I got out of the game quick. But it's all right. Stay in the game. Be a good player, and just go slowly. And so it's a very good analogy, both for gradual enlightenment called krama mukti, and for jivan mukti, the final enlightenment. It's a good analogy for both. There are souls who just see through this in a thrice. Come here, look at it. There's a beautiful story, and maybe we'll end there. Is that Holy Mother and Dalai Lama, not Dalai Lama, Kali Rinpoche both said this, and I heard Kali Rinpoche say it in person. But he's in the beginning of time, in that beginning where there is an inception. The divine Lord Brahma came out. Divine Mother said, "Fashion the worlds via your gunas, your thoughts." He's got very powerful thoughts and very beautiful thoughts, so he fashioned the worlds. And as that vibration he sent out went down the spectrum of vibration, it got denser and denser, then all the worlds came out. It's all projected from the mind. And then the first beings came and peopled those worlds, and they came out onto the field, and they looked around and said, "What's this? The 5 elements? Objects? This is unreal. We don't like this. This is a ruse." And they gave up the body on the spot and died. They didn't live more than 5-10 seconds. They saw through it just like that. And then, so Brahma went back to Divine Mother and said, "They're not buying it. This creation, this cosmic cycle isn't working. I can't figure it out." So Divine Mother said, oh, I forgot to give you Maya. It's a little seed. Put this in your creation, in your creative thought next time. They'll love it. So we put in Maya, the worlds of name and form and time and space based on cause and effect and pleasure and, pain. Because some people were born to enjoy pain. Go figure. So the whole gamut of beings came out again, and they took on the body and they loved it. They say, "Oh, we love this body. We are this body. There's no other than I. I'm it. See? And I will rule, and I will dominate, and I will enjoy." And the ego got in there. Basically, the Maya is kind of the seed for the ego. So, sort of illustrates what I was talking about earlier about beings who are very good at the game of Golokdam. I think it's called Golokdam. And they just, pass go, collect their $200 and get out of the whole process right away. But if they keep a body, that's their higher purpose. The Jivan Mukti will keep the body after enlightenment. That really helps us. The Videha Mukti, Videha means free of all bodies, will give up the body for all time and will not come back again unless there's a very powerful being to convince him to. Ramakrishna convinced Vivekananda to come back out of that highest samadhi and attend the worlds. There's songs about it. Basically, Vivekananda was sitting for 700 years at a time in meditation. That's how Holy Mother described him. He sits for 700 years of our time in meditation in a causal body. Like a wooden statue, she said. Doesn't move. So he's stilled everything. He might as well not be there. But there's a semblance of him that is potential, In fact, Father of Yoga teaches that you keep, if you're an enlightened soul, you keep a little karma on purpose because you can't get back into the body without it. Brahman is so beautiful. that if you're in it, you do not want to interform. That's just, you might as well just try and accept that until you experience it yourself, like I accepted my teacher's words about it. But if you keep a semblance of karma or a semblance of the gunas in your mind, in your thinking process, the very thought process that Brahman projected the universes with, then you have a possibility to create a body, and you can project it where you want. That's how the great souls do it, how Buddha did it out of enlightenment, how Christ did it out of enlightenment. And then they enact imperfection for you. The dark night of the soul to them is taking on the whole collective karma, just like Buddha did 550 years before him. They're enacting the taking on of karma. It's not like they don't suffer. It's like suffer's unreal to them. They know suffering's not real, but they still have bodies, so they're going to suffer. Nerve endings and so forth. So that's the play of the avatar which we were talking about over the last 4 classes, and which we'll finish up today. So speaking of finishing up, let's bring an end here. Om Sato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityur ma Amritam Gamaya Abira Bira Mayeti Rudrayate Dakshinamukam Tenamam Pahinicham Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the illusion of death to eternal life, from the unreal to the real. Reach us through and through with thy sweet and benign presence. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.